Hey people, how are you all? Hope you're doing well, and a big welcome to all the new people who've joined this channel in the last week or so. It is so lovely to have so many new people here. I'm really enjoying reading all your comments and everything. Clearly this is not a Good Omens video, however I'd encourage you to stick around anyway, as this is a video about a little piece of LGBT inclusive media. Specifically, my own comic that I wrote, which has just hit its 1-year anniversary of when I began posting it. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about what it's actually about, some of the things I've really struggled with, and then some of the things I've learned over the past year, and actually the previous 2 years before that as well, when I was doing all the kind of pre-production-y stuff for it. So to start, what is it actually about? Knights or Fools is essentially an LGBT adventure story that's a retelling of King Arthur's Knights of the Round Table and some of their stories. Specifically from the perspective of one little knight named Dinadan, who's there chilling in the middle of the poster. Dinadan is a slightly cynical and practical sort of knight who is both very bad at fighting and kind of holds a deep skepticism for all the rules of chivalry and the general idea of courtly love. As far as he's concerned, he doesn't care who goes around insulting his honour, or anyone's honour, frankly. He's not going to start picking a fight over it. In fact, he's well known for walking away from fights if he doesn't have a serious reason to be in them. This is partly because he's terrible at fighting and nearly always loses, but also just because he realises that when you fight with real proper swords, somebody is inevitably going to end up dead, and, well, it should be worth it rather than fighting over some petty squabble or something. His opinion of the sort of knights who do take these chivalric ideas to extremes is not exactly a good one. He thinks they're all idiots, to be entirely honest. One of his closest friends, however, is Tristan, who's in the bottom left there with the sword, who is an exceedingly good fighter and an excellent knight, in theory, and a bit of a ladies' man. But he isn't actually a knight at all. People keep offering to make him a knight, but he keeps refusing, making him a bit of an oddball in court and in Camelot, hence why he and Dinadan became friends in the first place. And the little kind of group and trio that we're going to be following has one other member to start off with, which is Gouvernail, or Gov, who's stood just to the right of Dinadan. And he is Tristan's childhood best friend, a member of the Royal Guard, and kind of part-time squire on his days off. He's also technically Dinadan's boyfriend/partner, because, hey, they both like each other, so they figured why not? Gov, though, has no intention of becoming a knight at all, because there are far too many rules and expectations that comes with it, but he's an excellent fighter with all sorts of things, and a bit of a weaponry nerd. He's well known for being able to pick up pretty much anything and win a fight with it. He also has a massive soft spot for cute animals, hence the cat, who he has adopted in episode 4 or so, because I wanted to put a cute cat into the story. And these three have been sort of going about their lives rather successfully, really. Dinadan gets given quests by the king because he's a Knight of the Round Table, but if he brings these two with him, then they actually tend to have a functioning brain cell between the three of them. And Gov and Tristan can stop Dinadan accidentally getting stabbed, whilst Dinadan and Gov can stop Tristan accidentally causing an international incident. Until one day they're tasked to escort the Princess Aizilt, who's the blonde woman at the top of the poster, although as I'm saying this, there's probably no colour yet, so you won't be able to tell she's blonde, and her handmaiden Brangian, who's in the bottom right, back to Ireland. And if you know your Arthuriana, you'll be able to guess where the story of Tristan and Aizilt might be going. And if you've never read any Arthuriana before, well, I'm not going to spoil it for you, because hopefully it's going to be fun. On this journey, however, they also meet Lancelot, who is the giant floating head, and who is sort of Dinadan's complete opposite in terms of ideology. See, he was raised by a fairy and knows he's supposed to be a great knight, but has no idea how to actually go about it. So he's been cobbling together bits and pieces from stories he's heard and epic poems and things, and has come to the exact opposite conclusion that Dinadan's come to, and is taking each of those chivalric ideas and poems as a kind of law. Until they meet, and they both start to realise they're not entirely right. That following rules blindly is very dangerous and gets a lot of people killed, but that sometimes fighting a battle you can't win is still worth the risk if you can help someone you care about. And if none of the story or character I've talked about so far sounded like a good idea and appealed to you, well then there is also a very cute one-eared cat named Merlin who sits around in the background of various shots looking adorable, serving next to no plot function but being cute, so there's always that. But like I said, I've now been posting and uploading this comic for just over a year, and I had been working on concept and idea stuff for it for a whole nother 2 years before that. So I've certainly picked up a few things, and I thought I might share them with you. One of the biggest challenges for me, actually, has always been plotting stories. I've been coming up with story ideas since I was old enough to write and think and imagine stuff, but I was always excellent at the beginning and the end, and then had no ideas for the middle or how to pad it out at all. Which is actually one of the reasons why I chose Arthuriana as my first idea that I planned to make into a real comic, because it meant that I had a whole wealth of source material to pick adventures from to kind of fill in that bulk of my story. In fact, I actually intended on making this comic very episodic, using those legends so that I could practice comic making and then just stop at any times by wrapping up the latest tale. They'd go on one adventure, then another, etc. Unfortunately, I got very attached to the characters, though, and this story has spiraled massively out of control and is now very, very long and kind of involved plot, and I really want to write all of it. So I don't know if I'll ever finish it, but I'm going to try. Speaking of the characters, though, this method was also super helpful for them, as it gave me a bunch of half-made options to choose for and then reinterpret however I wanted. I kind of had, like, base settings for a bunch of characters. Someone asked me recently if Gov in particular was an OC, and what I've realised is that in the story so far, up to chapter 14, which is the one I just released on the anniversary a couple of days ago, there aren't actually any OCs at all, unless you include random crowd drawings. Every character is taken from Arthurian legend. Most of them are taken from Le Morte d'Arthur, because that's the book I'm using as my main piece of source material, because it's the one I have. Although admittedly, some have changed a lot more than others in being added to my story. Gov and Bran in particular do both appear in the legends as servants to Tristan and Iseult respectively, and they help the two of them communicate. Their only defining character traits seem to be almost irrational loyalty to their bosses, to a slightly concerning degree in a couple places. And so I decided to flesh them out a little more, and actually as the story goes forwards, they're both going to become really big parts of the plot and the way the relationships and the characters develop, because I had so much more freedom with them and the roles they played than I did with some of the other characters, like Lancelot, who there's ways I can interpret him, but there is a certain set of expectations people are thinking they're going to see when they read a story about Lancelot. There are, however, going to be 2 original characters in the next part of the story, so chapter 16 onwards, in Dinadan's sister-in-law and his nephew, who I did make from scratch, but so far I think they are the only ones. One of the problems I have faced, though, that I was asked about recently too, was deciding on the degree of LGBT acceptance and familiarity in this world. All of my characters, with the exception of Tristan, are queer. Tristan is only straight in so much as he's never actually been attracted to anyone of the same gender as him, but he's kind of perfectly happy for the universe to surprise him on that point, if that's what happens. And because of this, I wanted my world to be a safe place for them. My favourite kinds of queer media are always the ones that focus on queer joy as opposed to oppression. Stories about this community's struggles are obviously very important to tell and to hear, but I have seen so many films and TV series, etc., about how hard it is to be queer and exist, and I didn't want to make this story into another one of those. I also didn't feel particularly qualified to write about it, because whilst I am a gender-questioning, biromantic ace person, I'm lucky enough to have never actually experienced homophobia or transphobia directed at me in the real world. I've seen it in the media and online, but in my own life I'm relatively safe, and so I didn't really feel like this was my story to tell. However, this idea of writing a safe, inclusive world did come into some conflict when I realised that a number of my plot points hung specifically on the idea of a patriarchal society, because, you know, that's what the legends are written in, that's arguably what we still live in. Namely, political marriages and the generalised less opportunities for women in the sort of world that I was building. And I didn't want to completely erase all of that, because it's pretty central to Bran, Iseult, and Guinevere, who we've not met yet, and the way their stories develop going forward. Because a world with perfect equality for queer people and relationships, by necessity, also has to have equal opportunities for women and people of every gender, because, you know, how can you have equal opportunities for lesbian couples if women can't do anything? And so I've had to start slightly bending things in a couple of places. I've tried to build this world and society around certain ideals that allow for these gender norms to kind of be broken in certain places. Sure, it's still a patriarchy, but King Arthur's court specifically puts a very high value on swordsmanship and knightly abilities, which actually you do get a sense of in some of the legends. But here I've extended it to mean that anyone of any gender can become a knight and sit on King Arthur's council, as long as they prove themselves to be a good knight. The world I've built has a very specific and concentrated upper class, meaning that nobles are much more constrained on what they can and can't do and who they can and can't marry. But if you're only a few rungs lower on the political ladder, or not set to inherit anything, then you have much more freedom about what you can do. For example, Dinadan's father was Lord of the Fens, and his older brother is now also Lord of the Fens, but because Dinadan is a second child, and he's never going to run his estate, particularly given that he has a nephew, so even if something would happen to his brother, the estate would pass to his nephew, it means he has a lot more freedom, and so Dinadan is gay. And so I can write a story in which Dinadan could theoretically have a happy ending with a husband, despite the fact that we are in this slightly patriarchal society. If that makes sense. In fact, queer marriages are not even necessarily banned among the top of the upper classes, as long as they provide political gain of some kind. So two princesses, for instance, could get married to each other, as long as it benefited the families and there was an heir available in the family somewhere, but if that political marriage was particularly useful, then there would be no issue with it. I've still not worked it all out perfectly, but I'm starting to pin down exactly how I want it to function a bit better, so hopefully the way it appears in the story and the way it feels written makes sense and feels natural to the reader. But we'll see. I have also, over the last few years, picked up a lot of useful tips and experiences from making this comic. The big one you've probably heard before, and that is to just start. I spent 2 years changing character designs and starting and restarting the first chapter, trying to make things perfect before I finally said, you know, I'm just going to pin down my plot and start posting. And whilst I still change things and update designs as I go, actually posting and making an attempt to do so regularly has improved my comic art so much more in this last year than it improved in the 2 years I spent fretting over whether or not it was right and whether or not it was good enough to post. And as a very small comic, you tend to find the people who do comment are super nice about it if your art isn't perfect. I certainly have. And having it up online means you get live comments and feedback, which I have found really motivate me to improve. The next tip is also a bit of a vague one, of course, but go easy on yourself. I wanted to post every month, but I missed one in May due to uni deadlines. A couple of chapters have come out a couple of days past the 8th, which is the date I usually put it out on. And once chapter 15 is finished, I am probably going to take a few months off because I would like to have a buffer, and having one would massively help me keep on top of posting every month. In fact, not making a buffer is definitely a mistake I made when I first started posting the comic. I didn't wait to do that because I just wanted to start posting it so that I could have it online and I could have that kind of definite we've started kind of feeling. But as advice goes, I would suggest give yourself a 1 or 2 episode buffer, because it means if you have something like my little wobble in May where I didn't have time to finish things because of uni deadlines, you can continue to post and feel less bad about it. But the thing is, if you're a tiny little account like me, then we need to be honest here. Your comic is probably not going to get viral or get super popular, especially if it's the first comic you ever made, just like mine is. So you're making it for you. So if you don't get a chapter out on time, or you need to take a break to make yourself feel better and regain your passion for it, then just do that. Maybe it will suddenly get hundreds of views, but at the end of the day, if you're trying to get practice and tell a fun story like I am, then you're the priority and you should be enjoying it. My comic is something I make because it makes me happy. I am fully aware it is probably never going to be the most successful thing in the world, and doing it because it makes me happy is really fun. If you were hoping for tips in this video on how to get recognised and spread the word about your comic, however, I'm afraid I don't actually know the answer. I've been trying a few things I've seen suggested in other videos, such as making YouTube videos, and I like to post a little chapter preview on my Instagram, but my Instagram account's also very small, and there are not many people, I think, who are seeing it there and going to my comic. A few months ago, my view numbers did jump, and nearly doubled actually, and I still haven't entirely worked out why. I'm very grateful, of course. In fact, I adore all the lovely comments people have been leaving on my work, but I have no idea what is actually bringing them in. So basically, if you're trying to grow your comic and get more views, good luck, and maybe go check out some other YouTubers' channels who have had more successful comics and see what they say about it, because they'll probably be able to give you much better advice than me. There's also a dozen different techniques for how to keep focus as you work, and what order to do various bits and pieces in for your process, but I think those things are very much about finding what works for you. I found that breaking my chapters down into 4 individual canvases and working on those helps break it up for me, because I feel like I've accomplished more when I finish like a quarter of my thing. I've changed the order in which I sketch, or the amount of detail I put into my sketch before I line work, etc. over the last year. But they're very personalised, and the way my brain works will be different from the way your brain works, which will be different from the way everyone else's brain works. That said, if anyone wants me to do a little video on my step-by-step process for making a chapter with actual footage from me drawing the chapter rather than a speed paint like this, then I would be more than happy to. Same with any videos on plotting or scripting and such, or I could stick it all in one. I can't promise they'd be the most professional writing tools and the most helpful kind of academic learning, because I'm not a writing academic of any kind. I'm studying animation at uni, and so this isn't really in my purview. But they would probably still be entertaining if that's something you want to see, or if you just want to see how somebody who has no idea what they're doing goes about this to make yourself feel better. That's something I could absolutely create if there is the demand for it. I am at least much better at making comic chapters than I am at posters. I was super excited about the design idea I'd come up for this poster. I was like, oh, it's great, I'll use it to advertise my comic and everything. And I must admit, this speed paint did not go as intended. I had a very clear idea, and it has just not worked. But that's what happens sometimes. Oh well. But with all that said, I think I'll probably draw this video to a close. I do hope you all enjoyed it. I am so proud of myself for having made it this far with this story, and I am really hopeful I'll be able to create another video just like this next year if I continue to post for another year. If you did enjoy it, please stick a comment down below. I massively appreciate it, and I always love to hear what you guys think. And I hope you'll all have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you soon.